G'day folks, Mark Newton here once again, and this time I'm bringing you the number 3 in the series of the Comparative Adaptive Morphology of Scorpions. And this time it's about the colour of scorpion babies. Bit of an unusual topic. I think most people would think. I'm sitting here rugged up tonight with my beanie on and my gloves because it's freezing outside. Thought I'd take a warm topic on board. Scorpions. Desert related animals make me think of something nice and warm in interior Australia. I'm actually fairly inland here and it's still freezing. Okay, so when is a scorpion baby a baby? I'll let you know about that because I'm defining what a baby is in this particular video. Are all scorpion babies the same colour? And how do scorpion babies vary in colour? And why do scorpion babies vary in colour? Maybe we can think about that. And at what stage do scorpion babies change colour, if they do? Okay, so when scorpions are first born, they are babies. That's what I'm referring to. Okay, so they're actually first instars. So first instar just means the first stage after being born before they shed their skin. So I'm just referring to that sort of post-embryonic stage, I suppose, as babies. You can see them here on the back of this Isometrics manicatus, a number of them here sitting on the back. So they're first instars, they've been born, haven't been out all that long, and they have not as yet shed their skin. So just in case you're not familiar with scorpion growth phases, this is a diagram I put together a while back that's in my book, showing the 6 stages of Isometrics shinshinkoi. Most Isometrics appear to have 6, though it's been shown that Isometrics manicatus might only have 5, but most of them seem to have 6 that I'm aware of. On the right we have the first instar newborn, which I'm referring to in this video as the baby. That's an extrapolation in size because I've never actually seen a first instar Isometrics shinshinkoi. So I've extrapolated it based on knowing the size of other species that are more or less the same size as Isometrics shinshinkoi. So you can see that every year the scorpion, what it does is it sheds its skin and it has a leap or a jump in size. So it's sort of like punctuated growth. So instead of being a gradual growth, like most organisms that don't shed their skin sort of grow gradually. I mean, they might grow faster over spring or summer, but there's still a sort of a gradual growth. But in scorpions, it's punctuated, sort of a bit like punctuated equilibria, sort of these quantum jumps in their growth stages. So we're talking about just the first one, the baby. Now, if we look at baby scorpions, first instar scorpions, we see 2 really distinct groups. The first group, the babies are very, very white, milky white, clear looking and milky white, very distinctive. The second group, however, is the complete opposite to that. They're a lot more like mum. They're very strongly pigmented, often strongly pigmented, but always pigmented to some degree. Sometimes there's not much pigmentation, as we'll see, but there is always, this certainly appears to just about always be pigmentation. So 2 groups, the pure white sort of milky looking group, and then there's the pigmented group. So if we look at the pure white babies, they have a milky white viscera, so the internal organs are very milky white, as you can see. So pretty much really like all this hepatopancreas, all this internal organ is pretty much just like a real milky white colour. And the clear milky extremities, so if you look at the tail, it's sort of semi-transparent, legs are the semi-transparent, so are the pedipalps. The only part on them that is pigmented appears to be the eyes. Median eyes, as you can see here, and the lateral eyes are very black. So they appear to be the only part of this baby scorpion which is pigmented. The rest of it completely lacks pigment. Now we see this in Isometrics all the Urodacus I've seen a number of species of Urodacus, the young of a number of species of Urodacus now. They're all the same. They're all pure white. And it's the same with Cercophonius. Cercophonius, which is a completely different family. The Urodacus are in the Urodacidae, and the Cercophonius are in the Bothriuridae. So even though they're related because they're scorpions, they're in different families, and that's a fairly distinctive difference. They're not a genus apart, they're a family apart. So even though they're not really that closely related, they still have these pure white offspring going on, which might give us some sort of clues to maybe what's happening with this. And this is Cercophonius. You can see really the offspring are almost identical to that of Urodacus. If you swap these over with Urodacus, you'd have to look pretty carefully to see that these were Cercophonius and not Urodacus. They look very, very similar to each other. And here you can see Mum, look, she's chowing down on one of her kids. Scorpions, they eat their young. That might be something I can put in another video one day. Why scorpions eat their babies. Strange habit. Okay, so a common theme. Urodacus and Cercophonius are both scorpions that do not wander. They do not wander while looking after their young. And generally speaking, they don't wander much anyway. The males do when they go out looking for females. The females generally don't. Cercophonius, sometimes you'll find them sort of around tree bases and that sort of thing, but they're generally not far from home. Certainly I've never seen them out with the young. Okay, so they're normally obligate burrowers, obligate rock scrape dwellers and that sort of thing. So all these guys that don't go out and wander seem to have babies that are pure white. So maybe that's a clue to what might be going on. So if we move to the pigmented babies, so we've got the milky white babies, and now we're looking at the pigmented babies, and they're really, really distinctly different. I mean, look at this guy here. This is Lycus spinatus besti, common species in Mallee, South Australia, often found in amongst leaf litter around the base of trees. Very common place for them to be. And it has very, very distinctly pigmented first instars. And there are various degrees of pigmentation in these scorpions between species. So some species the pigmentation is quite strong, quite dark, quite like pretty widespread right across the animal. Others it's not, as you'll see. So there's variation in the degree of pigmentation and the strength of pigmentation. And it could also be a location thing. So distribution wise, for instance, maybe the pigmentation might vary depending on the habitat. I don't know if that's true, but it wouldn't surprise me. So all the buthids that I know of, Lycus, Australian Lycus, Isometroides and Hemilycus, I have not seen the young, the first instar young, but because they are pretty much the same animal as Lycus, they're more or less the same. They have a common ancestor. They're very, very closely related. Very similar lifestyles. I can imagine the Isometroides, Hemilycus would also produce pigmented offspring. Isometrics, which is a separate group of scorpions, still within the buthids, Isometrics also have pigmented offspring. And then I've got there the Hormurids with a couple of exclamation marks. The Hormurids? Hormurids are the rainforest scorpions. Lykellies. They were all called Lykellies in Australia until a few years back. Most of them went into a genus called Hormurus and the family Hormuridae. We still have Lykellies australasiae in Australia. They're very, very similar animals. But they don't have milky white babies, and they tend to lean towards the pigmented side. But you can make up your own mind about that when you see them. So what we have here is a Lycus species from the Adelaide Hills, otherwise known as the Mount Lofty Ranges. Mount Lofty Ranges is the real name, and people that live in Adelaide call them the Adelaide Hills. And this is a very common species in the Adelaide Hills, found on trees a lot and under bark. And it's an undescribed species. And you can see here that the young are very, very pigmented. Much like the mother, they have that same kind of strong pigmentation going on. The mesosoma is still fairly clear, and it's fairly milky white looking within the mesosoma. You can see here, not as strong as Iridacus, but the main thing is the fact that they are so heavily pigmented. So you can see they really blend in. They don't stand out like babies do on Iridacus and Cercophonius. And a beautiful species, Lycus bucheri, common right across inland Australia, at least in the southern half of inland Australia. Mostly an inland species, highly variable and no doubt a species complex. They do tend to prefer more open areas, more open habitats. But as I say, you can get them in mallee areas where there's a lot more scrub as well. And you can see the young here are also once again quite heavily pigmented, in a similar manner to how mum is. So the young are sort of reflective of the adult stages, or the later stages. The independent stages is probably the better way of describing it. So they're not sort of as embryonic looking as Iridacus and Cercophonius. They look a little bit more advanced, a little bit more ready for the real world. Another shot of Lycus bucheri with the young on the back. You see the way they all hang on to mother's back, pile on top of each other, and strongly pigmented. This is a species found Caboolture in Queensland of Lycus, probably in the Spinatus group again, I would think. And it has very, very strongly pigmented young. I mean, look at that. They're quite dark. And that could be a habitat related issue, probably found in heavy leaf litter, but very, very dark, strong pigmentation. And you can see that mother also has quite a dark exoskeleton, quite heavily pigmented animal. Isometrics, same deal, very, very similar to Lycus. Same kind of thing going on, the same sort of degree of pigmentation. More or less reflective of the older stage, of the independent stage, and very much contrasting with Iridacus and Cercophonius, the milky ones, totally different. And then we've got Australopithecus xerolimniorum, the inland salt lake scorpion that lives, or forages I should say at least, out on the open salt lakes of South Australia, which are pretty much just completely white. And the babies are pretty close to white. They're very, very similar to Iridacus, but they have also got pigmentation. You can see it in the tail, and you can see it in the pedipalps, a little bit orange there in the pedipalps, a little bit of orange around the cephalic area, around the head, on top of the head, the eyes. And once again, the eyes are heavily pigmented. The only part that is, other than the colours in this case. So the pigmentation of the eyes is a common factor in both groups. Both of them have dark eyes, but the pigmented animals have pigmentation in other areas of their body and the exoskeleton. The milky white group don't. But these are the widest of all of this group that I've seen, and that could be reflective of the environment the animal is in. We'll have to think about that in a little while. So, what do all these scorpions with pigmented babies have in common? Maybe if we can think about what they have in common, we can think about what's going on. We might be able to draw some sort of an understanding about it. So, they are all wanderers, and that's pretty important, I think. Except the Hormurids. I don't think that Hormurids are really wandering scorpions. I don't live in Queensland where Hormurids are found. Queensland, Northern Territory in the top end. I don't live there. I can't go out and watch them in the wild, which I really love. I love going out and watching animals in the wild because you learn so much. But I don't think that they probably come out and wander about on a log at night, sit out on a log, look around rock crevices and things like that. They may do a little bit of external wandering from where they live, but I think they're pretty much at-home predators. They either forage directly from their burrow, some of them do live in burrows, or directly from their rock crevice, or under their bark or under their log. Some of them would forage directly there and wait for vibration of passing organisms, and others might just come out nearby and forage around nearby. So there could be some degree of exposure in their actual, for females, if the females come out with young, there could be some exposure. But the most important thing is that the biggest difference between this group and the other group is that this group are wanderers. So it leads me to think that it has something to do with evolution, with camouflage and evolution, of course. So the word crypsis is important to know. In ecology, crypsis is the ability of an animal to avoid observation or detection by other animals. Okay, so it may be a predation strategy. So, you know, if you want to catch something, you need to go into stealth mode. So you might be there crouching in the grass and you've got the right colours going on and you remain perfectly stationary and that sort of thing. So in that case, you might be a predator waiting to pounce on something. So you'd use crypsis, behavioural crypsis, and also the way you look, your camouflage and so on, in order to catch prey. It could be an anti-predator adaptation as well, which is the one we sort of probably think of the most. We think of animals which camouflage, have camouflage, blend into their environment, spider on tree bark that you just can't see and so on. So methods include camouflage, as we've mentioned. Nocturnality means coming out at night time. You're less likely to be seen at night. You're less likely to be detected at night. Subterranean lifestyle, so if you live underneath the ground, it's going to be harder for other organisms to detect you, to find you and eat you. And of course mimicry, so if you can look like, act like, smell like some other kind of organism that's not particularly liked, or an organism which is avoided, something toxic, something dangerous like a wasp or an ant, if you can look like that or smell like that or act or behave like that so that other animals think you're that organism to avoid, that's called mimicry. That's another form of crypsis. So crypsis can involve visual, olfactory, which is like sense pheromones and sense of smell, taste and so on, or auditory concealment. I don't know of any auditory concealment cases. That could be to do with producing a sound that makes you sound like something else. It could be a form of mimicry, I'm not sure. So when it is visual, the term cryptic coloration just simply means camouflage, animal camouflage. And various means of camouflage are employed. So in evolution, if a variable character is not selected for, it is often lost. Okay, so this occurs as the genes responsible have neutral selection pressure, in other words, no selective advantage. So if some particular character of an organism, for some reason, in a changed environment, or like the animal has, the environment's changed, or the animal's on a sort of a peripheral area and it's adapting to a new area, a character that was important before may lose its importance. It becomes neutral and that character can be lost. So white or albino babies, because they're almost albino, they're not quite because of their dark pigmented eyes, but white or albino babies have no survival advantage in expressing pigment, as they are very unlikely to be exposed. That would be based on crypsis. Okay, so there's no advantage in having pigment. So babies that have pigment, that are born with pigment, don't have any selective advantage over their white peers. They're not more likely to survive. This is in contrast to pigmented babies. So pigmented babies, if they're pigmented, they won't be seen. Mother won't be seen. Mother won't die. They won't die. That could be what's going on. So I like to call it the cave effect. Troglobites, or cave dwellers, lose characters that would be beneficial in the world outside of their cave. But these characters become selectively neutral within the cave. So for instance, pigmentation is often lost in troglobites. So animals that have got particular pigmentation in the outside world because of the visible light, when they become a different species and they start occupying a cave environment, because all these cave dwellers will first they'll occupy the area around the entrance to the cave, and then they might occupy the entrance to the cave, and then they might go in a little bit, there's still some light moving in and out, and then eventually some organisms actually live right down inside caves where it's completely dark, there's no light, and those animals pigmentation is no longer needed. It becomes a neutral. The genes that produce it become neutral, and so those characters are lost. So things like pigment, eyes are often lost or reduced, and while other characters such as tactile ability, the sensing the environment, picking up air currents and vibration, maybe picking up chemicals as well, those kind of characters will increase. So that could be the sort of thing that's going on with the scorpion and the baby colours, the colours of the baby scorpions. Hence, there is no selective pressure for Euryadacus or Cercophonius to produce pigmented offspring. This is based on Crypsis. In fact, producing pigment requires energy. So having fatter offspring, now putting the energy into like the stores of food and other components that might be more beneficial rather than pigmentation, which it isn't. Having fatter offspring is a better deal than wasting energy on a character that is not required. Maybe something like that's going on. Because energy is very important when it comes to organisms. Conservation of energy, using energy efficiently. So pigmentation in newborn scorpions may come about due to, these are the two things that I've thought of. You might come up with a different idea. This is speculation. I don't know the answers to this question, but this is what I think is most likely going on. One of these two are probably dominant. So firstly, the mother being surface active while carrying the young. The increased camouflage of the young might increase the chance of survival for both her, the mother, and her offspring. So clearly if the offspring are white and the mother's out wandering around at night, it's often at night there's ambient light, and other nocturnal creatures have very good eyesight. Like owls, owl at night jars, and nocturnal birds, nocturnal mammals. There's a very good chance that if the babies were brightly white and reflective, then they would be seen, and that means mum would die and the babies would die. Even if they were left off of her back, managed to escape, as first instars they would die because they need mum. And then secondly, exposure caused by a foraging animal. This could happen during the day or the night. Many buthids occupy leaf litter or bark environments. The possibility of being accidentally exposed during the day or the night is real, and pigmentation would once again aid in survival due to increased crypsis. So you can imagine that an animal is digging around in leaf litter trying to find food. It could be some sort of a marsupial, could be bird scratching around in leaf litter, exposes a scorpion. If the scorpion is well camouflaged, mum and the babies, there's a greater chance that she can escape without being detected and eaten. And that can be accidental. The animal could be, the foraging animal might be digging a burrow. It might be an animal which is a herbivore and trying to dig up the roots or something and still expose the scorpion, and another animal might see the scorpion. So it might be an indirect exposure. I think it's more likely to be one of those two cases. So not being obvious like these aeroplanes out near Maree and inland South Australia on the Oodnadatta track. If you ever get a chance to go out there, Oodnadatta Way, it's a great experience, amazing place, lots of scorpions. Okay, so this is the oddball one, the Hormurids. This is the Lykelles, which is now Hormurus. This one's from Goodna in Queensland, southeast Queensland. And you can see the babies here are actually fairly pigmented, which sort of surprises me a bit. I'm not really sure what's going on here. So these animals could be transitional between white babies and they could be now under selective pressure to become pigmented, or possibly it's the other way around, where the ancestors were strongly pigmented and maybe the pigmentation has now become a neutral gene and the pigmentation has been lost, because they do seem to be somewhat transitory, but maybe not. I really don't know, but you can see that there's pigmentation in these like tergites, the plates on the mesosoma. There's pigmentation there, especially in the lateral aspect of these tergites, and then you've got very dark looking exoskeleton like the prosoma, pedipalps, the tail, the legs, all sort of transparent-ish, but nowhere near the degree that Urodacus and Cercophonius are. So these guys are interesting. I doubt they would be wandering with young, but maybe they are. As I say, I don't live in that part of Australia where these are found, so I can't really study them, and I don't have any more clues. So you have to draw your own conclusion about what might be going on with them. Interesting group. So the last part I was going to look at is, when do scorpion babies change colour? Yes, they do change colour. I think that was one of the things I said originally. Do they change colour? They do, as we know, because scorpions obviously go from white, pure white, to looking like scorpions. But in the case of the pigmented scorpions, as we see here with Lycus spinatus bestii, you can see that the firstborns, the first newborn, are pigmented, and then when they become second instars, as here on the right, it's just really just an increased phase from the first instar. It's just like an increased pigmentation. It's more of it's just an exaggeration of the first phase, really. So they're really sort of, as young, they seem to be getting ready for independent life a lot quicker than the Urodacus and the Cercophonius. And you can see that in this case here, this animal here, where I've got my cursor, that one there is still shedding its skin. It's still coming out of its old membranous exoskeleton. These white bits here are the old exoskeletons. Another one like here, something's upside down, that's just come out, not quite completely removed of its skin, could be attached to the tail. This one here is still coming out. So these guys are in the process of shedding their skin. This guy's been out for a while. He's pretty cool. He's just sitting there going, hurry up guys. You know, this one here is just about completely out. So they've actually become second instars with pretty much full-on pigmentation. It's not really that different to how they'll be when they leave mum. And Isometrics is the same. First instars on the left. There's your second instars. Just the same as Lycus. They're very, very strong pigmentation, a lot like mum, and not far off leaving. And these guys do leave mum much, much earlier than Urodacus. Urodacus hang around, they take a lot longer. So Urodacus, you can see that milky white instars on the left, first instars, babies, and have a look at the second instars. They're not much different to the first instars. There's still no pigmentation. Maybe the claws, or the ends of the hands are a little bit darker. I wouldn't know if I'd call that pigmentation. So yeah, they've still got that white, transparent look going on. And these guys take, you know, what is it, maybe up to about a week or something like that before the exoskeleton hardens and they actually get some colour in them, and they leave mum to have an independent existence. So it takes a while for these guys to actually develop the colour that they'll have as second instars when they're independent. As in this example here, so this is Urodacus planomanus from Western Australia, and on the left you've got second instars. These are new second instars. You can see how incredibly transparent looking it is, and that's because the exoskeleton isn't hardened at this stage, but there's still also no pigment. This guy here, I think I took this shot about 6 months later. It's obviously well and truly left mum, and they leave mum once the exoskeleton's hardened, as I said, because they can't be independent if they have a soft exoskeleton. They can be damaged very easily. So when the exoskeleton hardens, at that stage it will be pigmented. They will be much darker, and they'll look more like this one here, and which has got the pigmentation, the full pigmentation for its age. So pretty amazing transformation from this clear, transparent looking animal, which came from the milky original first instar, and eventually they become like this, but it takes so long compared to the other group, the pigmented group. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the show. and hit the thumbs up button if you did. I hope you learned something. Maybe you hadn't thought much about scorpion baby colour. It's a bit of an unusual topic. Subscribe if you haven't. I'll be doing some more scorpion videos and some spider videos and things. Hope to get a few out this year, this coming spring and summer. So thanks for watching, and yeah, I'll see you next time. Hopefully not too soon. Not too far from now, I should say. Cheers.